So, basic search. So if you type anything in the search, it will try to guess if you have terms, if it recognizes the name of a field or something. Or you can just type in words just like you would in Google, just words you want to see, and then you'll be doing a grep search, which is the really old thing where it just looks for that word anywhere in the event. You can use Splunk that way. It is missing most of the advanced features of Splunk, but it's a perfectly fine way to do it. Just look for a line containing this word, and it will find the log lines that contain that word. All right, if you everything is search terms up until the first pipe. A pipe is what you put before a command because you want to do something like a total or a table or some kind of aggregate operation. But everything before that is a search term, and it will be looking for those words in the log line. Now, after the pipe, it will show you it will prompt you to try to help you fill out. Here you might want to make a chart or some other kind of chart like a time chart, or you can make counts of various types. You can count by host, count by user, count by source IP, and so on. So there's a wizard that will pop up to try to make this easier for you. Like I say, that's why you pay so much money for it. All right, this is, by the way, writing a SQL query, but everybody always writes their own version of SQL. I don't know why, but everybody does. So Splunk had to make Splunk SQL, SPL, their search language, which is SQL except mutated a little. Just like everybody has to take VirtualBox and customize it. Everybody has to take SQL and customize it. So you could, in fact, learn Splunk query language and write things there. I've never done that. You could, in principle, do that if you want to extend it. Yeah?
I already know zero query language.
Anyway, the whole point of these graphical user interfaces is you don't have to know a query language. You just need to know how to use it. Everything, I'm sure Google is also using SQL behind the scenes. It has to. But you hide that from the user, usually, because users usually don't want to write SQL. All right. So there's an assistant that will help you do things. You can control various levels of assistance. You know what's missing here is AI writing it for you, and I'm sure that's coming. This is from like a few years ago before everything was AI. And Splunk just got bought by somebody, so I imagine the new version will be full of AI very soon. But anyway, there's a search assistant that will try to match parentheses and things like that, which, most things do that for you now. So when you're done, it finds the total, it hunts and gives you a green check mark when it's done searching. Then it shows you the total number of events. Then it shows you a timeline of when those events were. Then you see the events here one by one, and over here is a list of the fields in the events. And that's the Events tab. There's also a Pattern, Statistics, and Visualization tab. So we'll talk about that. It always displays in reverse chronological order with the newest event first, going backwards in time, because they assume you want the most recent event matching your criteria. And by the way, it highlights anything. So up here I looked for failed password, and in quotes I looked for exactly that string in that order with one space between the word failed and password, just like in Google. And so here it's going to highlight the matching string in each event. That's all right. So here's individual events, and each event has a timestamp, which is automatically generated. It has a host, a source, and a source type. Every event has that, and then an index, and then it will have the rest of the log line, which may contain whatever that log data has. So the Events tab is here. That shows you these individual events. Timeline, okay. And I mentioned the fields and the timestamp. There's a smart mode, verbose, and some other mode up here. The Splunk certification test makes a big deal out of knowing those. In practice, I never pay any attention, but anyway. The time range picker, as we know, is super important. If you don't switch it to all time, you won't see anything with most of the data we're using. All right, and so when you mouse over the search results, it will highlight things. So if you, for example, look at this result and you say, this mail server, I want things on the mail server, you can highlight it, and then you can add it to the search or exclude it from the search. So again, you could just type the right query to get what you want, but you don't have to. You can use the GUI to point to it. This word is good. I want only ones with that word or only ones without that word. It will make it easy to do that in the GUI. All right, and you can lay it out in different ways. There's raw, list, and table, different ways to see it. Raw will just show you the raw entry, list, and table will lay out the data differently, and you'll see that when we get to the hands-on project. And you can choose specific times. Up here you can get canned things like last week or all time, and you can also go to date and time range and just type in between this time at that time and this time at that time. There is a problem with time zones that gets very confusing. If your data covers multiple time zones, the times here are the local time zone of this machine. So often, yeah, but often, if you're referring to data from some other time zone, you often have to adjust by an hour or two. It can get pretty confusing. And that will come up in some of the later Boston of the SOC stuff that we're going to get to.
Is there no UTC type option?
I couldn't find it. It's probably in there somewhere. There probably is some way to make it just use UTC. For example, probably just setting local time on your search server to UTC might do it.
Okay.
But I did find, by the way, it doesn't like to index events more than 5 years old, and the Boston SOX data is now more than 5 years old, and I struggled and struggled trying to find that setting, and I couldn't, so I just set the clock on my server back several years, and that worked. So my server thinks it's like several years ago, and when you log in, it'll warn you, the time on this server is wrong. Something screwy is happening, and that's what it is. Anyway, I couldn't find any smarter solution. That's like solving the problem with a hammer, but it did work, so, all right.
It works.
Well, yeah, it's a pretty damn unprofessional, but a whole lot of things I do are pretty unprofessional. Anyway, all right, so you can use an @ symbol to snap to the time unit, so by the 30-minute @ hour, we'll round off the hour and then go 30 minutes behind from there. So that's a funny syntax. You can do earliest and latest too. Specify the earliest time and the latest time. So this will go back 1 hour. This will be 2 days ago up to the beginning of today. So, you know, all these confusing regex looking garbage things to specify the time. And you can view the timeline, and you can just click and drag in the timeline to select a time range too. That's another way to go. All right. And that's what this does. You filter them and display only the events that are within a certain range of time. You can format the timeline. You can zoom out and zoom in to get finer and less fine time ranges, you know, all this sort of thing. Every search is also called a job, and the searches run independently, and there's a log of them kept. So you can run several jobs, and they can be running at once. You can go back and look at previous searches and run them again, and things like that. They're available for 10 minutes by default. You can even save them longer and even share them with other people and stuff. So you set them to private, shared with everyone, or have it in control of the lifetime, so you can make a search that does something that someone else would want to use. I used to do this in much more primitive MS-DOS-based tools. I was working at a financial company, and there was like a weekly report that had to be made. So I designed queries and then let somebody else run them that didn't really know databases much. They could just run the standard query and make this week's report. And that's what this is for. You can have an administrator design the thing and then share it with somebody else. And now all they can do is change like the date on it, but they can't change anything else about it, so they can't foul up. All right. You can share the jobs, your search jobs, with other people and control who they go to for that reason. These are all standard database functions, but Splunk has them and they make them pretty and easy to use. You can export the search results into things like text files, CSV, XML, or JSON, so you can feed it into other tools and format it, feed it into threat analysis tools or whatever you want. Everything has to have machine readable output now because you have more applications that want to use it on the other end. You can view your saved jobs and see all the various jobs here, when they were created, when they expire, and so on. And you can view your search history, just like in your browser. It'll show the previous searches. All right. And then you can use fields in searches. Now, all we talked about here is using it like Google, where you put in a word and it looks for that word, which is what they used to call a grep search. Grep is the command line tool in Linux that does that. But that's not very efficient. To just look for a word anywhere in the event takes more CPU, and it's not really what you want. Like if you look for failed login, but if you just look for the word failed, it'll be failed anything. You'll get a bunch of results that aren't really what you want. So what's more precise is to know what field to look in. Area code equals 404, action equals purchase, status equals 503. You give it the name of a field, and then you say that field should have this value. That's more precise, if you can figure out which field has what you need in it. All right, if you put two things here, like action equal purchase and status 503, then they both have to be present. It implies an and there. Now, if you want to, you can add the Boolean operator like not or and or. You have to use capital letters, and it'll turn orange. If it doesn't turn color, it didn't understand you, and it's going to be treated as a word to search for. This is the most common mistake. You put it in lowercase and it doesn't have effect. Now it looks for the word not on the page instead of using a not operator between these two conditions. All right, it will discover fields, and it'll try to help you type in fields, all right, and there are data-specific fields like action equals purchase. Sometimes it's obvious. Sometimes it's not that obvious. Here's status 200, but it doesn't have status equals here, showing in the raw event here. But it is treated as a status field, and you could see it if you viewed it in another way. All right, so now the field list here is a little screwy. At the top are the selected fields, which by default are the built-in ones like host, source, and source type. You can choose to select a field and put it in this short list. Then there are interesting fields, which are fields that occurred in at least 20% of events. And all the rest that occurred only in a small number of events are not visible. And if you want to see them, you have to click all fields. So sometimes you're looking for something and you can't find it because it's not into all the events and you have to go here to find it. All right. All right. And you can advise anything to the selected fields just like a favorite in your browser. All right, you can modify, when you click any field, it will then pop up a little box letting you do things with that field. You can look for the top values, the rare values, events with this field, or so on. You can choose to add it to the query. And you can do everything just by typing in the command line, but then you would have to spell it right and get the syntax right. This is just a GUI to do the typing for you. And we'll use it quite a bit in the demos I'm about to get to. All right, and to make any field selected, you can just choose to select it, and it'll add it to the first type. All right, so if I choose events with this field, it will add action equals star. This is something that might not be obvious. Action equals star means it must have a field action. If it doesn't have the field, it won't match this. That's not incredibly obvious from the syntax, but that's a fun fact. All right, so you could put in an IP address, but it'd be a lot better to say client IP equals IP address or status equals 404 and so on, so you don't get area code 404. That's the kind of thing. Field names are sensitive, field values are not. So host equals www3 and host equal capital www3 will both be the same. I don't know why they did that, but that's the way it is. All right. IP addresses, Splunk understands them, so you can use /24, you can use stars in it, any of the standard notations for IP address ranges will be accepted. You can use star for wildcards just like you would in Google or Windows command line. You can use less than and greater than, source port greater than 1,000, host not equal to www3. All the usual relational operators are there, of course, to make everything as easy as possible. This is one of the headache producers. Not equals is different than not. Status not equal 200 means the status field must exist and it has a value that is not 200. Now not status equals 200 means either the status is different than 200 or the field doesn't exist. So this could give you a headache. But, all right. And so here, status not equal to 200, you get 3,000 events. But not status 200, you get 66,000 events, because you get all the events that don't have a status field. So, all right. And they might yield the same result. If the field is present in every record, then they would be the same. All right. And there's fast, smart, and verbose. Like I say, fast is emphasize speed over completeness. This balances it. And verbose gives you more details. I've never really cared, but the Splunk certification people really think this matters and tell you use verbose for this and use smart for that, and I just don't care very much. All right, so let's take a look at the Kahoots for 5 and 6.
There's a Splunk AI assistant.
There is a Splunk AI assistant? Yep, I knew there would have to be.
It's to translate natural language into queries.
Yes, I'm sure it'll be built into Splunk soon. Boy, everything has to have an AI assistant, otherwise you're nowhere. Anyway.
Come out in,
but it's not on the blockchain yet.
Came out in 2023 July.
Yeah.
You're not ingesting all of your events into blockchain nodes?
Not yet. There was some news article that came out last week of somebody that is actually building a AI security feature with a blockchain. So I said, this is going to be the ultimate meme company. As usual, I couldn't understand what the blockchain was doing, how it was benefiting them, so that's the problem. Blockchains are like interesting mathematics, but they have no known purpose. I mean, whatever you do in blockchain, you can just use a database, and it would run 100 times faster and have no apparent defects. But anyway, blockchain's what? That's right. But not so much anymore. Like all the NFTs really did fall to zero. And you know, the NFTs actually made some sense. I've been defending them. The NFTs, in principle, would let an artist continue to get royalties as their painting gets resold, which is actually a use case. Most other blockchain products don't even have one use case. NFTs actually have a use case, but it doesn't seem to matter anyway. In practice, they were just used to rip people off. In principle, they could have actually done some good in the world. Maybe someday they will. Trump released another batch of NFTs. You should all jump out and get those.
Oh, I saw those, yeah.
But all the Trump NFTs are just pirated. They took the pictures from like a clothing marketing site of people modeling like coats and stuff and just photoshopped Trump's face on it and then sold them for quite a lot of money. So they're all stolen property, which, you know, that totally... What's that? I can't hear you, but... That's right. They actually went up. The first batch actually went up to like 300 or 400, so you actually could make money on them. I think this anyway. But technically, they're stolen. But that's the way Trump has always done it. Yeah. He's your typical sleazy businessman, and he's an expert at being sued all the time, and he cuts every corner, and he gets away with it because he learned how to manipulate the court system from Roy Cohn, who previously was the lawyer for Joseph McCarthy. So they developed this legal system of just snarling up the courts so you can get away with everything. And it's worked for him for 50 years. That's why I'm not too optimistic about all these court cases actually hurting Trump. I think he is too experienced at surviving in court. I think he'll skate through it all. But he will have to pay some money. But he'll just get more donations from all of his people to pay for all that. Donations from political, it's all a money-making scheme, and it's totally working. Yes. Yeah. All right. Anyway, I always thought he should headline DEF CON. He's the world's greatest social engineer. Anyway, all right, what character goes after search terms, but before a command like chart? That's right. I'd like to have the Jeopardy music, but I'm sure it's copyrighted. Anyway, all right, so that's a pipe is what is the end of your search terms, and then you have summary terms. All right. All right, what order are search results presented in? You can make a chiptune version, you know. Yeah, so reverse chronological. The newest event first. All right. All right, what makes a field interesting? It reminds me of a famous one in networking. What makes a common port? Both of them are terms that really don't seem to mean very much. No, common port is a technical term just like this. Common ports are the ones below 1024. And you have to have administrative privileges to listen on. It's an important thing, but the word doesn't tell you anything. But it's interesting because it's in 20% of results. That's it. That's not very obvious from the word either. Anyway. All right. Ginger. Good. Yes. You have to be fast and right. It's rating you by speed. And Jay Wu has written twice. Good for him. All right. So I'm going to stop this recording.